Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. We want to just jump on quickly and look at this Tennessee team now that the spring's kind of wrapping up and you start to have a better sense of what your roster is going to look like, what everyone's roster is going to look like, frankly, and kind of project what Tennessee might be able to be. Because, again, I think Tennessee is a team that people are starting to take a bit of note of, frankly, on the national landscape and be, well, this is a team that you just look talent to talent has kind of gotten to where I think you need to be in the SEC to be really competitive. And I think that's the one thing people miss is they talk a lot about Nico, talk a lot about Heupel and how good of an offensive mind he is. And Nico's certainly a big part of this equation because obviously last year I do think there was an element of being held back by that quarterback position and not just being efficient enough on that side of the ball. But what really gets me excited about this Tennessee team is you're starting to see them bring in homegrown talent, develop it at a really high level, especially on both sides of the line of scrimmage, especially you look at the defense. That defensive line is about as good as you can get in the country, certainly up there in a top 5 unit. And that's what's got me excited for Tennessee, frankly. Again, I think Nico's huge. If he plays really, really good, this team can go a long ways. But you just look, I think this defense can be really, really good, especially led by that front seven. So before we get too deep into the episode, just wanted to thank all the Tennessee fans for all the support. We love talking about this team. It's been a blast to watch. So that Josh Heupel bring this team kind of back where they're perennially, you think, have the chance to be really, really good. And obviously, you kind of look, last year definitely wasn't the year you would have wanted following up on that 2022 year. But again, what we kind of mentioned, that quarterback position, it just wasn't good enough last year. Nico can come in and bring them that. This team's got a lot of potential. So again, if you guys do enjoy the content, please consider continuing to interact, liking, subscribing, commenting. All that stuff means the world, and it really does help us out. So thank you for all the support up to this point. And let's get into this episode. And I think I want to start on the defensive side of the ball. I know a lot of people naturally gravitate to the offense, especially when you have that type of young quarterback with that much talent. But I look at this defensive line in particular. This might be one of the better units in the country. I certainly think it's a top 5 unit. And I think you look at it, what's really special about it is you have a lot of depth. You have ultra star power. I mean, James Pierce is about as big of a star, I think, as you can get in college football right now. But even you look on into that middle of the defense, you look at guys like Amari Thomas. I mean, he's really, really good. Bryce Neeson, he can obviously really play. And even as you get kind of into those depth spots, David Hobbs, I mean, who knows what he can end up being. I thought there were some really good moments last year. Obviously needs to put on a little bit of weight, continue to get a bit stronger, but you see that athleticism, how dangerous he could possibly be. And you look at a guy like Omar Norman Lott, I thought he was awesome. So you kind of look at this defense and defensive line in particular, I think in the middle, super deep, definitely need to be that way. You look at teams like Michigan, Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, always really, really deep on the inside. Tennessee's defensive line kind of looks like that. You look on the edges, obviously getting into James Pierce. He's a freak. He's as good as you can get in college football at that edge spot. But even you look at some of those depth guys. I mean, Josh Josephs, I think he's criminally underrated in a sense because, frankly, he plays in the same class and at the same spot that James Pierce plays. James Pierce gets all the credit, but you look at what Josh Josephs can bring to this team. I think you even go back to his freshman year, you saw some moments of really, really good football. So you kind of look – I think you have 2 really, really good edge rushers, and then on the other side of it, you got those physical guys who can play really, really good against the run. I mean, Tyre West, Dominic Bailey, bigger, more physical guys. So I think you have a really good combination of really explosive pass rushers with guys like James Pierce, obviously. Josh Josephs, again, I'll beat the table for him until I'm blue in the face. I just think he's going to have a really, really big year. So I think you've got a really, really constructed defensive line, both inside and out, really deep on both sides, have pass rushers, have guys who can play really physical. And that to me, when I talk about what's Tennessee done since Josh Heupel's gotten here, he's elevated the offensive play. He's an offensive mastermind. But you just see the way he's recruiting these defensive positions and how much better they are, how much deeper they are, how much better they're developing them. That to me is what makes Tennessee really, really dangerous heading into this year. When you step back into the linebacker room, it's a little bit different because it's a little bit younger, frankly, but still super talented. I mean, Keenan Pili is kind of your guy, in my opinion. Hopefully he can stay a little bit more healthy because when he was on the field last year, I felt like that Tennessee unit was at a different level. I really, really liked the way he played. Super athletic, really good instincts, getting to the ball, making a lot of plays. And then, frankly, you look around him, I think there's like a question of who's going to take it because you have four really, really talented players. Obviously, Arian Carter and Jeremiah Thielander coming in as true sophomores, both kind of played really good football last year when they got their shots. I mean, Thielander didn't play a ton, but made a lot of plays, I felt like, when he was in. And then I think the X factor to me, frankly, is Edwin Spillman. I kind of look at that spring game, and I mean, he's got the physical tools to play immediately, and he's got that super high ceiling. Obviously, you knew how talented he was coming out of high school. I'm really interested to see who runs with Keenan Pili because, again, I think you have four really, really good options. I don't want to leave out Caleb Perry. I think he's a really, really good player in his own right, too. So I think you have your one guy, Keenan Pili. He's obviously going to be the guy, but I think they have a ton of talent to pick from. That'll be a really, really competitive battle for that second linebacker spot. And you got some guys who you can really build a defense around. So to me, I'm really excited not only for this year for that room, but even into the future because guys like Spillman, Thielander, Arian Carter, I mean, those guys are really, really good. So if you look at this front seven, you're really comfortable. They were really good last year, only gave up 3.3 yards per carry on the ground. That was good enough for 13th in the country. So this unit can stop the run. They can obviously get after the passer. And that's their front. Their front seven is not your question about this defense. You look into the secondary room, that's where I think you got to take your step forward, if you will. I look at it, I think bringing in a guy like Jermod McCoy, that true number one big-time cornerback, and he only has a true freshman, was awesome at Oregon State last year. But him, to me, I mean, just having that guy who is like a bona fide draft pick, like that guy who's a surefire, he's going to be in the NFL at some point. I think adding that to the secondary room was huge because I liked Kamal Hayden. I think he gave them good work for sure for last year or two, but they needed that number one guy. I think you even go back into some of those other spots, bring in a lot of potential with Jacoby Thomas, a guy who you certainly hope grows in and develops into one of those really kind of premier players because you've seen good play from him from his time at Middle Tennessee, but there's another gear for him to get to. You just look at the athletic traits. That 6'2", 200-plus pound kind of guy. Likes to play that free safety role. Obviously, they needed to replace that from guys like McCullough and obviously Wesley Walker. But he's got that real potential to play really, really good ball. And then it's going to be, frankly, about some of the young guys. I think you look at the other cornerback, Ricky Gibson battling out with Jordan Matthews. Hopefully one of those guys can play really, really well. And then Andre Turrentine and Thomas Jordan, guys who you've kind of got to see a little bit up to this point in more reserve duty. But I'm kind of keeping my eyes mostly on what these younger guys can do, just because I think at the end of the day, what you need from Tennessee is just a bit of a higher caliber, a guy kind of to match a little bit closer to what you have in that front seven where you have a bunch of bona fide pros. Because I think Tennessee's been making strides in their secondary. You look, the explosive plays have come down. They're not giving up too many yards per game. But you look, the completion percentage is still sitting up a little bit too high. I mean, 64.6% completion percentage to opposing quarterbacks last year. That's good for 109th in the country. That number needs to come down because I just kind of look. I mean, again, they don't give up a ton of big plays, but this team, I think their defense can be one of those dominant, stifling, suffocating units. And I don't think you want to waste that necessarily with trying to be too conservative, let's say, in that back end where it felt like they were playing a lot of man, a lot of too high safety, or a lot of zone and a lot of too high safety, trying not to give up big plays. I think they got the guys, bringing in guys like Jermod McCoy and some of those younger corners to challenge teams a little bit more in that secondary and try to get that completion percentage down, try to make it harder, and try to be more suffocating. Because again, they're getting better. They're not giving up as many points, but I think this defense can be like kind of a top 10 unit where they can stifle teams. And I think to do that, secondary needs to take a step. And I think that just comes with being able to challenge teams more with that unit, play a little bit of man, play some tighter coverage, and just kind of, again, not play that bend but don't break style because the defense around it's way too good. So I think this defense as a whole, if the secondary kind of takes a step and you can get a lot of or you can get some really good play from some of those young guys, especially at the cornerback spot, I think you'd be looking at a really, really good defense because obviously the front seven, there's no doubt about that. That's littered with pros, deep, really, really great unit. Now just to get into the offense real quick, I think everybody kind of knows that at the end of the day, this offense is pretty much well ready to run at a really high level if they get really high level quarterback play. And they clearly didn't get it last year. And I think a lot of that comes down to Joe Milton's just never been a wildly efficient quarterback, even going back to his times at Michigan, where yes, he has the talent. Yes, he'll make the big throw at times. He can run the ball okay, but just not a play in and play out wildly efficient quarterback. Doesn't have a high enough completion percentage in a lot of cases. And so when you're looking, you just need Nico to play efficient football because when you can do that in the Heupel offense, I mean, you saw that obviously with Hendon Hooker. When he was there, people like to, he didn't have to do anything. That's just easy. But it's not always easy to be that efficient. So if they can get Nico, play that efficient style, I think they can use him a little bit more in the run game. He's just, again, I think Joe Milton was a pretty good runner, but Nico's a bit more of a natural runner, has a better sense of how to read holes, how to pick up yards and grind it out a little bit maybe than Joe. And obviously is a far better athlete in terms of his straight line, linear speed, his agility running the ball. So I think it'll be interesting to see what they can do or see what they can get from Nico because, again, everything else is there. Offensive line's really, really good, returning a bunch of good players, especially guys like Javonte Spraggins and John Campbell Jr. I mean, Spraggins one of the best guards in the country for my money. John Campbell Jr. I thought played really, really good on the left side. You get to move him over the right and slide Zalance Hurd into that spot. And again, obviously Zalance Hurd didn't get to start a ton for LSU, who's got for me best two tackles in the country. But Lance Hurd's obviously awesome. I mean, he's going to come in. I think he's an immediate starter. He's going to be a first-round pick probably at some point in his career. I think you look at what they have now on that offensive line. Was a really, really good unit, I thought, last year. Runs the ball, can be physical. I think they're going to be really, really good this year, bringing some of those guys back and obviously adding Hurd. And then you obviously have good running back play. Dylan Sampson proved it last year. Very comfortable with what he's going to be. And then in the wide receiver room, I think people kind of sleep on how big of an injury, frankly, Brew McCoy was last year. Brew McCoy was very much that wide receiver one on that team. And not just as a big play receiver. I mean, just his ability to get open, be difficult to deal with because of his size and runs good routes and catches the ball over the middle and can catch it contested. I think having him back is going to be massive. I think he could have gone to the draft. I think it's nice to have him coming back this year for the Tennessee Volunteers. And I also, frankly, who else I love is Chris Brazil Jr. I thought in the spring game he kind of looked like that pure number two guy who really does a good job getting open in that short and intermediate kind of pass range. And just a guy that felt like they were missing. I thought kind of to me he's going to fill what Ramel Keaton was. I just think he can do it a little bit more effectively. Hopefully you don't have as many drops in that unit, which was obviously a problem last year. So, again, I look between some of the young potential talent they have with guys like Mike Matthews and Braylon Staley, I should say. And then your more proven guys like Brew McCoy, Chris Brazil obviously had a very good year at Tulane last year. And then you even have guys to mix in like Squirrel White, who I think we were all waiting to break out last year, but never really got the chance just because that pass offense never really got going. But a guy that in the Heupel system, I think can do a lot, can get down the field effectively, really, really good with the ball in his hands if he can get some space. And that to me is where it again falls on Nico to be efficient. Can you get Squirrel White the ball with opportunities to make plays with it? Because if you can, I think he can have a really big year. If you can stay on schedule a little bit more effectively. Yeah, I just think everything's in place. Bring in Holden Stays, obviously, is nice to add to that tight end room. Everything's in place. Have a really good offensive line, have good skill, have a coach who obviously knows how to get the most out of quarterbacks and develop them really effectively and put together a really good game plan week in and week out. Everything's here for this Tennessee team. Defense should be really, really good if they can just take a little bit of a step in that secondary to be just stickier, put that completion percentage down a little bit. That should be a dominant unit. And on the offense, I think we're always going to kind of expect Heupel to be up there in terms of offensive efficiency and being able to put points on the board. Again, if Nico plays really, really well, watch out. I think you just look, this Tennessee team can be extraordinarily dangerous. So, yeah, I think this team, we kind of look, yes, Georgia's probably the clear favorite in the SEC, but just given what Tennessee has across the board, if they get really good quarterback play, I think this team's ready to go play with anyone. On any given day, if you can play that good on the defensive line, you can make it really, really hard to deal with for other teams. And I mean, they have that. There's no doubt about that. Again, there are some questions. How good does Nico play year one as the starter? How good can their secondary be? But there's also a ton of answers. Both sides of the line of scrimmage are going to be loaded. Wide receiver position, very good. Running back, very good. Offensive line, very good. I mean, this Tennessee's team's ready to go. It's just got to make a couple tweaks. Secondary, quarterback, I think this team can have a huge year.